Hi everyone, so first of all I took the top off the plastic baubles and put it onto the end of a paintbrush so I could hold it nice and steady. And I chose matte baubles because the paint sticks better to the matte ones. You will need to put a layer of varnish over the top afterwards, or some like fixative or something. So first of all I put a layer of black acrylic paint all over the bauble, like so, and on some of them I did 2 coats, and what I did in between each coat is dry it off with the hot air gun. You could use a hairdryer just to get it to dry faster. And the paint I'm using is a matte black as well, because I quite like the look of the matte black, but if you wanted them to be shiny, just use a gloss varnish afterwards. Just get one that will work on plastic as well as acrylic paint. So here I'm just drying off the bauble with the hot air gun. Just be careful not to hold it on for too long because you will start to melt the surface of the plastic, because these are little plastic baubles. And then I put the little gold fixing back on the top and threaded some thread through. And once I'd done all the baubles, it was time to add the design onto them. Now obviously you can use anything. You can do skulls, Nightmare Before Christmas, haunted houses, bats, spider webs, anything sort of gothic-y, spooky, Halloween-y type designs you can use. So for this first one I wanted to do a skull, so I'm just roughly marking out where the skull's going to go and where the eyes and nose and everything are going. And when you do the white over the top, you will need to use 2 or 3 coats depending on your white paint. The one I've got is a high viscosity one, by Pebeo or something like that, or Pebo, or however you pronounce it. But I found that if it's painted over black, it takes 3 coats to cover the black, so you might want to give yourself time to do a few coats. But if you dry it with a hot air gun, you can do the 3 coats within a few minutes of each other. For each of these baubles, I think it took me about 10 minutes in total, including drying time, so it wasn't too bad. Depending on how much detail I put on, obviously, and how many layers of paint I needed. And I just used a small brush, so just find the smallest brush you've got and use that for this, because obviously these baubles are small. If you do bigger baubles, you can get away with obviously a slightly bigger brush, but I just did these little teeny weeny ones so they can go on my little tree. So yeah, teeny brush it is. Obviously I've simplified the designs to make it easier to paint at this size, because obviously the scale's very small. And yeah, so here I've done a basic skull shape and just added a few teeth. I will go back in and define some of the areas, especially around the teeth, once the layer of white has dried. But I wanted to make sure I got a nice solid layer of white first. So as you can see, it's still a bit patchy at the moment, but as I start adding more layers, and because I was doing thin layers, it was drying quite quick because it's quite warm in my room. So it was drying quite quick, and also the bauble was still warm from where I'd used the heat gun on the previous layer, so that helped the paint to dry quite quick, so I could do another layer over the top. And as you can see, as you apply more layers, the white becomes more opaque and it works better. And the advantage with the fact that the background is painted with black acrylic paint is when I touch up like the eye and stuff, to define the shape of the eyes and nose and everything, obviously it blends in perfectly with the background colour of the bauble, because that's the same colour I used to paint it. So as you can see, I've just added a couple of layers, and then what I'm doing now is going in with some black just to redefine the shape of the eyes, because I did go over the eyes a little bit. And it was a bit awkward because my paint kept drying really quickly. but it was quite a cold day, so I had the heating on, so the room's quite warm. Here I'm putting the gap back in the teeth where I'd smudged over the top, and I'm just tweaking the shape of the teeth to make them a bit more tooth shaped, but again very simplified, nothing major. Not going for loads of incredible detail or realism here. And once I'd tidied that up and made sure everything was nice and neat and how I wanted it, I just left that to dry. And then for the next one, I wanted to do another simple design, so I decided to do a sort of cartoony cat skull. So first of all, start off with a rough oval shape and fill that in. And just keep the edges nice and even. I found this one, 3 coats I did on this one on the white, just to make it nice and opaque. And just make sure you cover any gaps. I didn't worry about leaving the eye sockets this time because the black will go over the top of it. And then put on the little cat ears. Just a couple of little triangles. And then I wanted some little fangs at the bottom. I did make these a bit bigger, which you'll see in a second. Because they didn't quite stand out as much as I wanted, so I made them a bit longer. Like so. And obviously don't worry if it's not perfect, you can go back in and touch up with the black paint to just define any sharp points like the teeth and everything. And here I'm just going over the white again just to make it a little bit more opaque. Make sure it's better to do several thin coats than one thick one, so you can get the paint nice and smooth on the bauble. Then I'm just going to go over the little fangs. And obviously if you're using bigger baubles you could add like more shading and stuff. And then I got some black acrylic paint to put the eye sockets on. I like this one because it's a nice simple design. It's just basically that big white blob shape, and then just add the eye sockets on later. It's nice and easy to do. And then leave it to dry once you've defined the shape of the teeth. And if you feel that it needs another coat of paint, just do another coat of paint once this coat's dry. So that's my little cat skull one. Then I got another bauble, and for this one I decided to do just a simple spider web. Make sure as well when you paint these, like look at how the bauble hangs on the tree. So like hang the bauble on, and whatever's like whichever sides would be the front or the back, you want to paint on those. If you paint in a weird spot on the bauble, you can have it where you can't get it to hang right on the tree. So have a look how it hangs on the tree and paint on the front of the bauble. I painted a couple of mine slightly to the side, so I had to fiddle with the string a bit to get them to sit how I wanted, but never mind. So I just started off with a cross and then a diagonal line through it, and then did these little sweeping little sort of, I don't know, curved lines through the middle to join the spider web together. and you want to have it where the outside edge, as it tapers off, have it taper off as much as possible, and get the points to go as thin as possible. And if your paint's doing this, it just means your brush is drying out. You need some more paint and a bit more water. And then here, as you can see, I'm just taking those ends and just bringing them out a bit more, tapering them out, and then adding a little bit more to the spider web. Obviously you could do this on the front and the back as well. I just decided to do the front. If you get any lines like that that look a bit thick, just go back in with the black paint after it's dry to touch up that edge and just make it a little bit thinner. And then once it's dry, do another coat. Then for this one, I wanted to do just a simple sort of Jack Skellington type face. So I painted the front white, did 3 coats, and here I'm just drying it with the heat gun before I put the details on. And also you'll see in this, I did mess up the one eye. So what I did was I wiped off the black paint where the eye was. Then I dried the whole thing and painted a couple of layers of white over the top, and then redid the eye. So at least with this you can get rid of your mistakes. You just put some more white on over the top of where you've messed up and then start again. And as you can see, because I did like 3, I think I did 3 or 4 coats on this one, you can see it's a nice opaque white, so it stands out really nicely. And then just give that a second to dry. Again, use a heat gun if you want to make it quicker. Just be careful you don't make the surface of the bauble bubble with the heat. So here I'm just giving it a second to dry off, just so I can paint the black over the top. And then I'm going to take some black paint and put his nose and mouth on and his eyes. I tend to start off by putting the nose on first because that's like the centre of the face, and it helps me to mark out where the face is going to go on this white oval shape. So I'm just putting his little nose in first, and then I can work everything out around that afterwards. And what you want to do is, to do lines this thin, just use the very tip of the paintbrush. And don't have too much paint on your brush. So you don't want the paint like in big blobs on your brush or anything. So just wipe off the excess paint. And then I've got to do these little lines that go through for his teeth. If any of these come out too thick, don't worry, just use white paint to just cover up any bits you don't want later on. As long as you let the black dry first, you can go over it dead easy with the white. And then it's a case of putting his eyes on. I did want him to have this sort of grimacing kind of look on his eyes, but you'll see in a sec, I just misplaced this second eye completely. But like I said, I wiped off the black, put a couple of layers of white over the top, and then dried it off, and then repainted it. So you'll see in the final picture that I've adjusted the position of the eye and the shape of the eyes to get them how I want. And that's it. That's just a simple way you can make some Gothic Christmas decorations for your tree. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.